And thanks for your time and attention today on this 2-hour program. We'll go from now until the top of the hour. We'll take a 15-minute break and then we'll come back and finish up. So this is a subject which is near and dear to my heart, negotiating. I taught this program as a standalone workshop, full-day workshop for many years. I worked as a trainer for the American Management Association, which is the oldest training company in the United States. I think they were founded in like 1927. And I worked for them for 13 years teaching this program. It's based on a book that I wrote with my dad. My dad's name is Carl with a K, Carl Albrecht, and he and I wrote the book Added Value Negotiating back in 1996. So the slides that I sent over to Vicki also included an article that I wrote way back when, probably 25 years ago, on the added value negotiating concept. What I have for you today is a sense of negotiation as being really different in really one specific way. And if all you take from our time together is this one concept, then you'll be way ahead of the game. And the issue is that you always make more than one offer to the other side. And we're going to use the phrase TOS, the other side, as an acronym for it. Could be a group, it could be an agency, it could be another library, it could be a department, could be a vendor, could be your city, whoever the other side is it could be one individual, a group of individuals, a team. If you think about the negotiating process now, as perhaps you learned it the way I learned it in the old days, is back and forth, kind of what we would call a win-lose approach. You make an offer, they make a counter offer. You make a counter offer, they make another counter offer. What we figured out in that time span of looking at the added value negotiating concept is many times in the win-lose process, the offer counter offer process, what we get is a reduction. We start off with a big piece of the pie and then we start to whittle the pie down until it's very small. What we tried to create is this concept of added value, which says, let's make a set of deal packages which have a lot of what we call value factors in them. The other side gets to pick 1, 2, 3, obviously 2 or more, 3 or more, 4 or more deal packages to pick from. You have done your homework. You have prepared what you need from them, what you want for your side, and you've created deal packages that you could live with. You probably have a favorite, but if they picked 1, 2, or 3, you'd be happy and you can close up. What we get away from is what we call single issue or single subject negotiating, which is typically price. Things oftentimes de-evolve to the price piece rather than saying, let's look at all the other value factors besides just the cost of goods or the price for the services that we're paying for. So when we look at the other things besides price, price becomes a value factor. It's not the only value factor. So I'm happy to be with Vicki and Tampa Bay Library Consortium here today. My primary training subjects typically over the last 20 years for libraries have been on safety and security. My ALA book on library security was published in 2015. I've been working in that arena for libraries ever since. So this is a kind of a unique way for me to talk about some other things that I like and subjects that I like, books that I have worked on in this area. And also I do my partnership with Library 2.0. I have a number of webinars for them that are related to some non-security issues in libraries as well. So we've got one coming up tomorrow on performance evaluation, for example, on Library 2.0. So if you go to library2.0.com, it's on there. And the reason I like talking about things sort of other than safety and security is because I like to be known in kind of a more broader brush than just the library security guy. I can do that. Certainly, I've been doing it for 20 years. The workplace violence guy, the ex-cop, that kind of thing. But I like this type of stuff because it allows me to think about kind of the business part of your library, what you do in terms of who you negotiate with as part of your operations and what you bring into the organization, services, vendors, facilities, maintenance, repair, things that relate to products and books and things that you buy that you got to negotiate about. So my website is up there, Dr. Steve Albrecht. There's some lots of ways for you to get a hold of me through email through there or through a telephone call. I'm certainly happy to answer any post questions for you down the road. I also ask you to think about printing out the slides and putting them into file folder, just looking at them maybe a couple weeks after we talk, maybe after the first of the year. Take a few minutes with a cup of coffee and sit down and look at the slides again and kind of go over what we've talked about. It's easy in the Zoom and webinar formats to get kind of overwhelmed with information. I talk really quickly, and that's kind of a curse that I have. But I can cover a lot of material in a short period of time. And also, I have tried to create slides, and this is my sort of go-to when it comes to webinars, that will be there after I leave, meaning that sometimes I go to webinars, and I just attended somebody's webinar yesterday for a marketing thing, and the guy's slides were so bare, like they just had one word or two words on it. I couldn't, 2 weeks later, I couldn't remember what he was talking about. So I have to take careful notes in those types of materials, because sometimes it's hard to remember what the point was, when you look at it a few months later. So I've tried to put as much richness and depth into the slides so that they serve as my, training piece after I leave, so that you can look at them and go, oh yeah, I remember what he was talking about. So let's talk about this concept of kind of the old school way of negotiating, which is called added value, or win-lose, versus the new way, which is called added value. And again, the biggest focus for you is, can you think about this concept of making more than one deal package? And I'll give you some examples using a satellite TV or a cable company TV contract as an example, to the other side. And what we do in that process there is we take all the value factors, not just the cost, not just the price, but all the other value factors: delivery, term, service, installation, credit, insurance, whatever it happens to be that can be negotiated. And we put it on the table for the other side to pick from. And so I think you'll be intrigued by the process. You'll be intrigued by this approach. You can start off using this added value approach with your smaller projects, smaller contracts, smaller negotiations, and kind of work into the big stuff. Back in my time as a consultant, when we were teaching this subject pretty exclusively, I think the book came out in 92 or 3, something around there. We were doing it for unions on the union side, and on the management side, we were doing it for large organizations. One of the biggest contracts I ever had was with the telephone company MCI. I think they got bought out by Sprint or something like that later on, but we did a huge program for them all over the country back in the late 90s. And so the concept of added value negotiating really was intriguing for many people, and I still talk to folks today who use it. Here's one of my favorite cartoons. This is from Gay and Wilson. He's a cartoonist who just passed away a couple of years ago for the New Yorker, and this is one of my favorite sort of negotiating cartoons ever here. These little guys here: ice drink 5 cents, ice drink antidote $1. And just like how there's little businessmen here, the look that this kid on the right has got on his face when he's trying to collect the dollar from this guy who's dying, it just makes me laugh. And this kind of humor, I guess it's sort of like Addams Family or that kind of thing. These kind of jokes just make me laugh, especially when we think about negotiation. So here's some stuff which you already know. Personally and professionally, every discussion is a negotiation, and every negotiation should be a discussion, meaning that we do better work personally and professionally in our personal lives and our professional lives when we talk with people. It's not just looking at the numbers and signing the proposal, or signing the sales sheet, or signing the draft, or whatever it happens to be, and sending it back to the person. We have a conversation about the things that we need and about the things that we think the other side needs. Now, there's something in negotiation which you need to get around and get over, which is there is a power, I believe, in transparency. Transparency says that we will share, as much as we feel comfortable doing so, with the other side what we need. And what I typically find in negotiations is, you're not entitled to that information. I'm not going to tell you that. You're not supposed to know that. We're going to keep all our cards close to the chest, and we're not going to reveal very much. And I always say in those situations that many times in the end of the negotiation, someone will say, well, here's what we really needed, or here's what the price we would have gone for, or here's one of the value factors that we had to have. And I always say, if you had told me that in the beginning, we have done this much differently. If you had said in the beginning what you need, this would have been an easier process. And so what I think people are taught in experience and in school and in maybe one-day programs, or that they've gone to on negotiation, and we'll talk about a couple of those, is that we need to be secretive from the other side. Don't give up anything, because if you do, you'll get screwed. Don't give up anything, because if you do, they'll have one up on you for some of this concept. I disagree. I say to myself, I feel confident, I feel assertive. I can always say no to things that they ask me to do. I can always say no to things that they put on the table, but I will try to provide as much information, share the pie, so to speak, share as much information as I feel comfortable. I'm not giving them the secrets to the recipe for Coca-Cola or for Kentucky Fried Chicken, but I will share as much information as I feel comfortable, so that they move the process forward, knowing what I want, knowing what I need. And sometimes, you say to somebody, well, I want $350,000 for my house. I owe $330,000. So for you offering me $330,000 is not going to be useful for me. I can't do it. I need 350 to pay off the loan and to do the down payment for the next house. So I'm happy to talk about $350,000 and some other things that we can add in as other value factors, like, and we'll talk about some of these, like, I'll carry the note, or you can use a split down payment with me or something like that, whatever it happens to be, but I got to have $350,000. I think sometimes in those negotiations, we come in and say, let's not give any information to the other side. They need to figure out what they have to figure out. And as a result, things take longer. And often times too, there are bad feelings at the end of the discussion, at the end of the negotiation, where someone says, if I had only known that, this would have been easier. If you had just told me that, this would have been an easier process. So I feel confident. I feel assertive enough. I have done my homework, and that's with a capital H. I've done my homework about what I need and the other side needs, and I'm guessing what the other side needs. And I ask good questions to figure out what the other side needs so that we can have a conversation about what solves the problem for you, what solves the problem for me. Many times in negotiations that we look at in our personal life, whether it's a house or a car or some kind of significant thing like that, we always focus on price and not some of the other value factors that are there. So I want you to kind of widen the lens as we talk about this to figure out some of the things that you may need in your personal or professional life, where you can say, the only issue that we typically focus on is how much something costs, but there's lots of other things that we can negotiate. And there is a concept in negotiations that says that you can't negotiate, that you can negotiate anything. And that's wrong. Sometimes, if you go to the appliance store and they say the washer is $1,700 for the washer and dryer, and you say, well, I'll give you $1,500 cash. They go, we don't care. It's $1,700. Okay, well, I'll give you $1,700, with a cashier's check, and we don't care. It's $1,700. But there's lots of things that can be negotiated with the salesperson at the appliance store. Delivery, installation, setup, free soap, free whatever, that can be added into the deal that says, okay, $1,700 is the fixed price. And lots of things in our lives are firm fixed prices. They are. But there's lots of other things that can be negotiated around that firm fixed price, which is part of this deal package discussion. So I want you to think about how we change from a sort of transactional, over the internet or shipping paper back and forth to each other kind of a process versus a discussion. Because you may have a conversation with a vendor that says, the vendor says, we're really desperate to move this product, in which case we'll give you a huge deal on it. And if you knew that in the beginning, you say, great, I'll take more of it. I'll send me more of those books, or send me more of these bookcases, or send me more of whatever you need for the library. Sometimes in these conversations, when you find out where they're it's not necessarily a weak point, but what their hot point is, something that they want to do, it can be very useful for you. And when we say at the end, if you had told me that at the beginning, it would have gone a lot faster. We know we've not done a great job in terms of having this discussion. So I don't work in library world. I've been training libraries for 20 years, and I've been in 30 states, and including lots of them in Florida, and working for Vicki and her folks, lots of libraries. And so I'm making a guess here as to what kind of things you may negotiate in the library. It may depend a lot on what your position is. You could be in the director's seat, you could be assistant director, you could be deputy director, you could be a manager or supervisor, where you have buying responsibility, purchasing responsibility. When I look at things that I typically have seen in the library, in my experience, tell me whether you think this is pretty close here. Short and long-term vendor contracts, that could be for lots of things: repair, maintenance, delivery of stuff, service contracts, equipment delivery, things like that, where we have a short-term relationship with this person or a long-term relationship. We could sign contracts ranging from 30 days for a consultant like me for a training program, or 5 years, depending on what it happens to be. You could have a negotiation with consultants like me that come in and do training programs or IT services, or consulting on something around the programs that you're trying to put in place for the community and for the staff. You could have negotiations between departments in your actual library. You could have negotiations between branches in your library system. You could have negotiations with other agencies in your city or county: human resources, IT, purchasing, finance, maintenance, facilities, those things. We may have shared services or shared budgets, where you say, part of my budget is to work with this interdepartmental agency here to get the services or products that we need. You could certainly do things related to maintenance or repairs or installations of equipment. There could be service contracts and things related to that. What these people do or don't do on your behalf, how long they last, what it costs for certain things. You know, there's sort of I think about this deal package process. There could be a gold package, there could be a silver package, there could be a bronze package. The gold package, you get, you know, you pay the highest amount, but you get the most services. Silver, a little less cost, a little less services. Bronze, kind of the bare bones basic. Service contracts, your health plans, equipment, IT services that you may contract out. You can certainly use this process to work through a negotiated discussion, negotiated conflict resolution between two employees. I've done it many times. One of the key factors in this type of negotiation is the concept of ground rules. Ground rules says that we will create, as a supervisor with the two employees that aren't getting along, we will create a set of ground rules both of them can agree upon that are important to do in terms of their behavior around each other going forward. And I'll talk a little bit about this process and how you use it from a personnel, from a coaching standpoint as well. Certainly employment agreements, contract agreements. I've helped lots of people in my coaching practice negotiate raises with their boss. We have an example slide about that, and I'll talk about how you can negotiate a raise with your boss, changing compensation, salary, and benefits, and some of the other things that we may think of as could be put into a deal package beyond just a salary improvement. Certainly you have third-party agreements, third-party providers. Let's say you're doing some kind of community event and it's at the library and it involves, you know, kids. And so we have third-party people bringing in, you know, cotton candy machines and Jump for Joy and things like that. Well, we've got a third-party contract, which we have an indemnification insurance contracts with each of those third-party providers, which need to be negotiated as well. Book purchases, periodical purchases, furniture collection purchases, equipment, things like that, where you're negotiating with a specific vendor or somebody who is selling services on behalf of their organization. Again, all part of the negotiations in your library. So we think about the personal ones in our personal life. This could be, you know, a wedding, a vacation package, something like that. There's lots of things in our personal life, cars, houses, etc. But in our professional life, it's oftentimes an exchange of money from our side for services received or products received. And there's lots of ways to think about how we package these things into what we would call deal packages. Again, the idea is what we call a multiple deal opportunity, not just here's the price, take it or leave it. Anytime somebody says take it or leave it in a conversation and negotiation, there's typically some room to negotiate, but that's kind of that final language. So we typically don't say the words take it or leave it. We say here's deal package 1, 2, or 3. If you are satisfied with any of these, please pick the one that you like. If you're not satisfied, tell me what deal package number 4 looks like and we'll review it ourselves. And one of the key factors for the deal package concept is people cannot cherry pick. So you can't be, it's not like going to a Chinese restaurant where you say, I'll take some things from category A here and some things from category B and fried rice and chopsticks in category C here. You can't do it. The deal package stands alone. Now we can negotiate inside the deal package a little bit and fine tune some of the language, but they can't have people come in where you provide 3 deal packages or 2 and they cherry pick the best things for them. And I think about this in, you know, where the other side gets kind of greedy and says, well, look at all these cool things we have in terms of the potential value factors beyond price. We want the best for us. Doesn't work that way. You say, okay, these deals stand alone in deal package A, B, or C, or 1, 2, or 3. And if you're not satisfied with those, then that means I've either not done my homework correctly, or I need to have more conversation with you, or you need to come back with us with a deal package number 4, which we'll look at and we'll interpret and decide whether it's what we want to do. So this whole concept we're talking about here of the multiple deal package or the multiple deal opportunity gets us out of a price only negotiation and gets us out of a single issue negotiation. And I'll give you an example. I did a lot of work back in the day with unions, and sometimes on the management side, most often, and sometimes on the union side for these negotiations. Typically, the primary issue that unions negotiate about with their employee organizations is salary and benefits, wages and benefits, right? And so that will become the focal point of all the arguing and shouting and pounding on the table and things that people do to posture in these types of negotiations about wages and benefits. And say, okay, it could take us 3 months to come up with a new wage and benefit program for our employees that everybody agrees with. Now, the minute they introduce something different, like we want a new health plan, or we want a new training program for all employees to go through this type of training, then the union people will say, oh, well, that affects wages and benefits. Let's go back to that and we'll start the negotiation again all over again on wages and benefits. What I'm saying is, and I've done this many times, with the union discussion, with the employer discussion, with employee associations or unions, let's put everything on the table first. Wages and benefits, training, retention, salaries, how we do seniority, things like that. Let's put it all on the table and let's create deal packages that are connected to each of those value factors instead of just focusing on wages and benefits only. Because, and you've seen this as well, anytime we start to monkey with the price, it changes the other factors and you go, okay, well then price is not closed up. It's not been negotiated. Now we start all over again. What we say is price and salary, benefits, cost of something is a value factor. It's not the only one. So when we look at these things here, I want you to think about in your personal or professional life, what you can do to start orienting things around the multiple deal opportunity instead of just one take it or leave it kind of an approach. So probably the most popular negotiating workshop ever crafted was done by a guy named Karras. Chester Karras, I think he started in the 70s because I went through the program in the 90s and they were using videotapes. Some of you may have to Google what a videotape is. Some of them were using the program I went through, they were using videotapes where they showed people that were being filmed in typical Karras negotiations for the training, and people smoked cigarettes during the videos. That's how old they were. So Chester Karras, this program has been around, and if you flew back in the old days, if you flew in the 90s or up until even the 2000s, these guys were on every airline magazine in the center. They had a tear out, an ad that you could tear out, you know, perforated and tear out and take with you from the airline magazine. And every airline I flew on, Delta, American, United, Southwest, everybody had a Karras ad in their magazine, and their program has been around for 50 years. Now, that's a good thing from their standpoint because it suggests longevity, and they teach a process called win-lose negotiation. And their catchphrase here, if you look at it, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate, from my perspective, sounds kind of negative. I believe in both sides getting what they deserve. I like friendly people at the end. One of the problems with the win-lose negotiating process is sometimes it creates bad feelings where you say, okay, we held their feet to the fire, or they held our feet to the fire, and they got the price they wanted, or we got the price we wanted, but we're never going to do business with these people again. When I look at negotiation from a standpoint of we are in a relationship with these people where every year or every 2 years or every 6 months or however long it is, we have to negotiate again because we have an ongoing relationship. They're a vendor we need. They're a provider that we need, or we need something that they have, or they need something that we have. We have kind of a trapped relationship where we can't typically go out for bids for other people. Then we're going to be stuck with each other for a while. It is not useful and it is difficult to go forward if we have bad feelings at the end. Think of some type of situation like where maybe you bought a car where the process was so difficult, so tedious, so challenging, so painful, and you got angry or you got frustrated or whatever it was with the process. You said, I'm never going back there again. Now I'll buy this car now, but I'll never go back there again. In fact, I'll tell other people not to go back there again. Now, one of the problems with negotiating with people in the car salesmen and saleswomen is that they're not around after the sale. You don't come back a year later and the same person's there. They moved on to another job. It's very rare to see people in the car business year after year after year. Now, when I lived in San Diego and I bought my Toyota, I bought it from the same dealer every time. Every 3-4 years or 5 years, I would buy another Toyota because I had the same salesperson and the same service advisor who took really great care of me. And they saw that continuing business as something that they looked forward to because they knew that I was going to come back and spend money with them, not only in this purchase of the car, but in service as well. In lots of negotiations that we do where it's bad feelings, it's a win-lose process and there's bad post-negotiation feelings at the end. You go, I'm never doing business with those people ever again. The Karras method, if you have not seen it, The way when I went through it in the 90s, they would give you, with your partner, you got some money. I think it was like $20 cash. And you had to negotiate with the other side, which is another two-person team. And you could either get all of the money or none of the money. There was no splitting the difference. There was no, you get 10 bucks and we get 10 bucks kind of a thing. So I went through the process and my team won, but it wasn't a good process and it wasn't a good feeling. We got the 20 bucks and we were happy, and the other side got zero and they were unhappy. So the win-lose approach oftentimes, and if you look at this carrots process with the $20, what's the number one value factor they focus on? It's the money, right? The price, the cost. For us, what we talk about is there are lots of things besides the $20 that we could do. And maybe you get all the 20, but I get 5 other things that help me on my side. Or I get all the 20, but you get 5 things on your side that help what you're trying to do. So good for Karis. Those folks been around for 50 years. I mean, they started, what is 50 years from 2020, 1970s. I mean, they were doing this stuff back in the day. If you go to their website, they talk a lot about how people found the program invigorating and they liked it. And my thing is, it's really a kind of a style about a win-lose process, which I find distasteful for me personally. Other people liked it. You know, the choice is yours. So if you want to research what these folks are all about, take a look at Karis negotiation seminars and see what they're all about. From my perspective, it's win-lose. And I'm not into win-lose negotiation. I'm into added value. So back in 1994, my dad and I wrote Added Value Negotiating, and we really based the book on a model called the Harvard Negotiation Model, which I'll talk about in just a second. Added Value Negotiating was, if you look at the subtitle, the breakthrough method for building balanced deals. Again, deal packages, right? The idea that there is more than one deal that we provide to their side. It's not just a take it or leave it, here it is, this is what the price is, take it or leave it. Here's deal package number 1, here's deal package number 2, here's deal package number 3, at least 2. So we have a hardback version of the book, we have a paperback version of the book. If you want information about ordering the book, send me an email and I'll send you an invoice with a hardback or a paperback copy of the book. I'll cut the price pretty dramatically if you want either one. Our model for how we saw the added value negotiating process was based on a really well done book by Roger Fisher and Bill Urey, based on the Harvard negotiation project that they were involved in, called Getting to Yes. Getting to Yes is, from my perspective, the seminal book on negotiation that came out in the 90s. So they had Getting to Yes was their first big book. Second book that they wrote was called Getting Past No. That's pretty cool cover there with the cactus and the shaking of the hands. So Bill Urey did Getting Past No, and he did Getting to Yes with Roger Fisher based on this Harvard negotiation project. The Harvard negotiation project, in essence, was really this idea of more good faith negotiations, more positive negotiations, and where we did it differently from their approach is the multiple deal package. So they have a lot of vocabulary and language that you'll see that I'll talk about here that we adopted, that we like as well. Our big change from them, our approach with the added value negotiating book, and based on what we did to their approach is the multiple deal. So look at the paperback version of our book, and what we're trying to say is there's lots of ways to grow the pie. And we use pie, because I like to eat pie, we use pie as a metaphor in our book to say, look, lots of times we start out with a whole pie, and then we cut it into slices, and what we get is a reduced pie. What we're saying is, let's add to the pie. Let's add more ingredients to the pie. Let's make it a bigger pie. So then when we go to divide it, both sides get more than they anticipated. What I have found in my experience is people who go through our approach and can get comfortable with using the multiple deal package, the idea of 2 or more deal packages for the other side to agree upon, find out that they get richer, more full deals that they actually did not anticipate could be possible. They didn't realize that these things could actually be added to the negotiation process, and they're pretty excited about what they get as a final process. So here's a book by Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. Negotiating as if your life depended on it. He's, I think, some FBI hostage negotiator, and he wrote this book, Never Split the Difference. And I say, well, okay, unless splitting the difference makes sense for you. And so sometimes splitting the difference is how we get things done. I bought our house in Missouri, way different than the cost of my house when I sold my house for $750,000 in California when we lived in San Diego. Our house was put on the market here in Springfield, Missouri for $400,000, and we offered 375, and that's what they took. And she needed 350 for the house, and she went up 25,000 and went down 25,000. We went up 25,000 for where we were. We agreed 375. That was the thing that worked for both of us. The deal about splitting the difference in negotiations is never split the difference for something that you couldn't say yes to. So there's a concept in when I did the AMA negotiation class and in the getting to yes things called the settlement range. And we'll talk about the settlement range in detail in just a little bit. The settlement range says I have an upper end and a lower end where I can say yes or no. The no is I can't go below this, right? It's a figure, or it's an activity or something they're going to do or not do. I can't agree to it below this point. The upper end of the settlement range says, okay, anything I get above this is gravy. Anything I get above this, it would be very useful. So if you are buying a car, or if you're selling a house or buying a house, and you can have your own settlement range. You say, this is the most I will pay for this car. Now, if they come in way less than that, great, but this is the most I will pay for the car. And if you're selling your house, you say, this is the least I will take from my house. And this is, anything above that is great, but this is the least I will take for my house. When we look at the concept of the settlement range, what we're saying is your upper end is your other side's lower end, right? So oftentimes it's an inverse or upside down relationship, right? So if you say, let's say the house, I want $350,000 is the less amount I'll take, right? I can't take any less than $350,000. The other side may say, I can't pay more than $350,000. So their upper end, $350,000, could be your lower end. So it's kind of in reverse. What you have upside down is what they have. So for me, splitting the difference, splitting the difference is one of those ways where we get to an agreement as long as we say, okay, it's within my settlement range. I can split the difference and still make a profit on this deal. I can split the difference and still get value in this deal. So my thing of never split the difference, I never say never on anything in life. Everything is negotiable, sometimes, but the concept of splitting a difference says it may be useful for me to do certain things that split the difference where I still make a profit or still make a good deal, and the other side does as well. So Herb Cohen wrote another big negotiating book back in the 90s called You Can Negotiate Anything. And I say, no, you can't. You can't negotiate anything. You can negotiate a lot of things, but not anything. I gave an example. You go to Home Depot, you go to Lowe's, you want to buy a washing machine and want to buy a dryer set, and it's $1,700. They go, it's $1,700. They don't care if you pay them in pennies. They don't care if you pay on a credit card. They don't care if you pay on their credit card. They don't care. Now, can you negotiate free delivery and installation and hauling away of your old washer and dryer? Perhaps. Can you negotiate a box of Tide laundry pods, a case of those? Maybe. So there's lots of things that you may be able to add in besides just the firm fixed price. There's lots of things in life that are a firm fixed price. You say, okay, so this is where I disagree with Herb Cohen. Let's say you go to a restaurant. You say, okay, the steak is, we're getting a filet mignon and it's $29. Well, how about if I pay you cash? Can I get it for $24? And the waiter's going to say no. Well, how about if I write you a personal cashier's check, which is bank guaranteed? Can I get it for $24? The waiter's going to say no. A steak is $29 at the restaurant. Now, might you say, can we get a deal on your best bottle of wine? And the waiter may be able to say, I'll talk to my manager. We may be able to take $20 off our really high quality bottle of wine. Okay, maybe we negotiated that. Can you say to the waiter or waitress, we're going to have a big meal tonight. Is there anything you can do for us? Like if we get, if we get wine, can we get dessert for free or something like that? Maybe it's possible to do that. But you can't negotiate the price of a steak at a restaurant. You can't negotiate the price of a product that you're buying online. Think about, you go to Amazon and you say, I want this book. I'm going to buy Steve Albrecht's How to Buy a Negotiating Book on Amazon. And the price is the price on the book. And you say, well, okay, but maybe if I sign up for Amazon Prime, I get free shipping. Or maybe if I buy this book and another book, they'll cut the price on one of the books, that type of thing. So you can negotiate lots of things around the price, but you can't negotiate everything. Sorry. You can't negotiate anything from his book perspective. It takes the idea off of firm fixed price. Sometimes a firm fixed price is a firm fixed price. There's lots of other things where we call those value factors, which we'll talk about, which may be part of the negotiated discussion. But sometimes a steak is a steak, a book is a book, a car is a car, a house is a house. There's lots of other things that we can add in where we could negotiate, but this idea of you can negotiate anything, I disagree with. Okay. So if we think about the Karras approach, we think about some of the opposites to the added value approach in terms of how people do negotiations. The win-lose method is typically, this is a 5-step process I typically see. So let's say it's, for the sake of discussion, we'll say we're buying a collection of books for the library. Somebody has a collection of books that we want. It's some type of product, and let's say it's $5,000. So we say, okay, we'll give you $4,800 for it. And then the other side says, well, it's $5,000. And you say, well, okay, we'll give you $4,850. And the other side says, well, you know, we can't go below $5,000. And so you say, well, maybe $4,900. And there's a lot of back and forth and haggling and reconciliation and delays. And they say, okay, and we got it for $4,900. So the win-lose method oftentimes says, let us focus on one value factor, which is typically price. We will haggle back and forth. We will haggle about price or something that's related to the money part and not look at some of the other issues there. Now look at step number 4 there. We worry about this phrase concessions. This is a semantic word here that I worry about because it means to concede. I never make concessions to the other side. I never make counter offers to the other side. What I typically say is, let us look at some other options. I don't use the word concessions. I use the word options. Say, will you concede to this? I say, no, I will make an option. We have another option, another choice to look at this particular possibility here instead of making concession. To me, concede means give up. I don't like that. I don't use the word concessions. I use the word options, choices. So the win-lose method typically is they've got a high dollar value. You make a lower dollar offer or vice versa. They counter offer at another dollar figure. You counter offer another dollar figure. There's sometimes there's tricks and tactics in there. We'll talk about it. There's about 15 of them. We'll talk about them towards the end of our discussion here today. There's haggling, there's delays. One side concedes not against their will oftentimes because they have a deadline or there's something that they have to have, and they end up splitting the difference. I'm okay with splitting the difference, but sometimes people split the difference below what they would have accepted and they take a bad deal anyway. Win-lose negotiation is different than the approach that we're talking about because it is position-oriented instead of value-oriented. There's not a lot of trade-offs. There's not a lot of options. The vocabulary tends to be confronted. If you go to the Karras seminar, they refer to the other side as the enemy. They refer to the other side as the opponent. I refer to the other side as the other side. I don't use this sort of male-based, warlike, football kind of mentality of opponent or that type of thing. I don't use tactical language in my conversation. I try to use an additive vocabulary which says, let's figure out what's good for you. We already know what's good for us. Let's have a conversation. Again, the win-lose method tends to start off with one pie and we cut it down until we're down to a little bit of a slice. What we're talking about the added value approach is, here's the pie, let's add more things to the pie to make the pie larger. Okay. Look at these typical personal negotiations that you would have in your life, not particularly related to your work, but personal negotiations. Certainly, buying a house, especially for the first time, if you've never done it, is stressful. And it is stressful because there are a lot of people with their hand out. There are a lot of people at the escrow company, at the title company, and at the loan company. Everybody gets a fee. There's a house inspector. There's all kinds of stuff. Everybody has their hand out. Everybody gets a fee. Oftentimes, if you're like me, and I bought or sold, 6 or 8 houses in my life, is you say to yourself or you say to your spouse or partner, if I keep signing these documents, at some point, they're going to give us the keys, right? And so buying a house for lots of people is very stressful. There's the moving in part of it. There's the making sure that we get our loan approved. There's all the things that are attached there. It's very stressful. So oftentimes, and I've got some examples coming forward here, oftentimes the issue of buying a house, all we tend to focus on is the price. Now, there are lots of other ways to look at how we buy a house besides just the price, which I've got some examples coming forward to show you. How about the other side of the coin, which is selling a house? How about how stressful it is if you have to sell a house that you really need to sell? You have to move to a new city, or you're having financial issues, or there's something coming on in your life where you says, we really need to get out of this house. We're desperate to get out of this house. And then again, the only value factor we tend to focus on is price. If we don't get the price we want, we sell the house at a loss and we still owe money on the mortgage. Not a good day. So a very stressful experience for lots of people there. So buying and selling a house, very, very anxiety ridden process. You think about when you sign the loan documents and you, sorry, and you look at the amount financed, you say, oh my God, look how much we're spending on interest here. Look how much in the life of this loan, a 30-year loan, we're spending on interest here. Buying a car is a stressful experience sometimes in the old school way. In the old school way, you come in, you talk to the salesperson. It's usually a guy. He goes back and BS's with the service manager for a while, and they come out and say, well, we can't do that. And then they try to bracket you in, and that's a trick or tactic we'll talk about called bracketing, which is not how much you want to pay for the car, but how much will you pay a month. You say, I'd like to keep my payments around $300 a month. They say, okay, then we got an 8-year loan or a 7-year loan, right? Instead of saying, no, I want to pay $26,000 for the car, we'll figure out the financing separate. So there's lots of ways in kind of the old school way, which is, well, we can't really negotiate the price because the price is the price. Well, in cars, you know, the price can be negotiated in lots of ways. You say, I'm not paying the sticker price. I won't pay the sticker price. And in fact, I'd like some other things added on, and we'll talk about that. I've got some examples there. Those of you that have ever sat through the timeshare pitch or the vacation package pitch from these hotels or these people that do timeshares is very stressful, right? I mean, it sounds positive and we're going to have champagne after you agree, but you know, you sign up for this thing that you can never get out of. We'll talk about how you would move into a new building. And if you have a building lease as part of your work, you're moving into a new facility where you have a shared space with a landlord. That can be very stressful as well because there's lots of complexities there, but there's also a lot of value factors. I have a discussion here as an example of how to ask for a raise. So your boss says, well, I can't give you a change in salary or compensation, but I might be able to do things with your title. I might be able to give you an assistant. I might be able to give you new office equipment, lots of possibilities there. Think about another 2 stressful negotiations with the wedding coordinators, right? You have to negotiate with the church and the photography person and the flower person and the cake person, all that, very stressful, or the wedding planner who does all that stuff. And then think about funerals. You know, someone that you care about and love dearly has passed away, and you have to have this high stress negotiation with the funeral company about caskets and cremation and services and churches and all that stuff, and it's very stressful. So think about all these things in this collection here, which is really based on oftentimes just price is the only thing that is the value factor. What we're saying is let's look at other things besides just price as the value factor. When we look at each of these negotiations, there's some common themes here. One is the time pressure. Buying a house, maybe you have a lot of time pressure, right? You can't buy the new house until you sell your old house, or you can't sell your house and move into another job in another state until you get the house sold. There's time pressure. There's a need. Sometimes people really want that car, or they really want that house, or they really want some product or service. And then as a result, they make a deal that says, I don't care how much it costs, I just want it. Weddings, funerals, buying a house, selling a house, a lot of emotionality and anxiety tied to those processes because they're expensive, they're painful. Sometimes, especially the funeral part, there's an anxiety based on the fear of the future. And then there's also a fear of making a long-term mistake. Certainly weddings, that's a possibility. Certainly timeshares, that's a possibility. Cars, not so much, but I mean, you can make a mistake on buying a house. You know, you move in next to people that are horrible neighbors, and you buy a house that you didn't really want. You buy too much house. I mean, there's lots of anxieties connected to buying a house. So think about the driving forces in negotiation. It's power, it's information, it's timing, and my perspective, we need a structured process. Now, if you take the first letter from each of these phrases here, power, information, timing, and structured process, if we don't have these things, it's the pits. Power is something that is leveraged on you by the other side. Now, we're not trying to be bullies in the process, but sometimes we have power because we're the larger organization or we have the advantage in the negotiation. That's fine. We're not trying to beat up the other side. How much information we have is critical as a driving force in the negotiation. How much we know about our own side, how much we know about what the other side is all about. And if we can guess, or they are willing to tell us because they want to have this sense of power of transparency as well, then this could be useful. Timing in negotiations is critical. If I need to have the product in New York City tomorrow, and you can't get it to me, then I can't do business with you. If we have leeway, then we can do business. But if you say, I have to have this delivered by noon tomorrow in New York City, and you say, I can't do it for you, then we can't do business. And the last one is, instead of using this win-lose, take away, reductive process, we're going to use a structured process, and it has this idea of the multiple deal package. Almost coming up on break time. I apologize for my cough. It's not COVID, it's allergies, and also it's a little acid reflux today. I do about 2 webinars a day. I did 2 yesterday. I got 2 today. Sometimes I run out of voice. Okay. We talked about some of this new vocabulary with you already. One is the power of transparency, which says, I am comfortable and confident in my position where I will reveal to the other side, see down at the bottom there on the left, TOS, the other side, I will reveal to the other side what I need. And I will make some guesses, educated guesses, homework-based guesses, what I think the other side needs as well. You tell me if I'm wrong. Sometimes people will share information, sometimes they won't. We talked about the importance in the first one there, not using the word concessions, using the word options or using the word trade-offs. Someone says, well, we want you to pay X dollars for this. And we say, okay, well, we can pay X dollars for it, but what we also want, free installation, free delivery, free this, free that. So let's talk about what we can do as a trade-off. I never use the word concession. I always use the word options or trade-offs. The 80-20 issue is powerful. Think about this. An 80-20 issue is based on Pareto, right? Vilfredo Pareto was an Italian economist. He said that 80% of his peas in his garden come from 20% of his pea pods. And in 80-20 life, that sort of works all the time as well. The 80-20 rule is pretty powerful. 80% of my revenue as a consultant for the last 33 years comes from about 20% of my clients. That's always the way it works. I do a cost analysis, how much revenue I take in each year, and it almost always works out that way. 80% of our problem patrons in the library come from about 20% of the people. 80% of your problem employees come from about 20% of your problem people, right? So when you think about 80-20, it's a pretty powerful way to look at the world. Now in negotiation, how we say it is 80% of the concessionary behavior where we give up or give in things happens in the last 20% of the negotiation. See what I'm saying there? So we may have a time span of the negotiation. We say, okay, as it gets down to the 11th hour, as we get down to the final signatures, as we get down to the point where we think we're at closure, we start to give up too much. Think about this in the house purchase situation where you go, yeah, fine, whatever. The realtor adds some sort of fee, or the finance company or somebody adds some sort of fee. You're like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. We just want to get the deal done. So we will agree to things that we wouldn't ordinarily do at the earliest part of the negotiation. We'll do it at the end of the negotiation because we just want the deal done. Don't think that the other side doesn't know that. And the other side will, if they're smart for their part, they will add in a bunch of things at the 11th hour that try to get you to cave in. And sometimes you have to say, and this is where the veto, number 4 comes in, veto power. Sometimes you have to say no. You say, are you telling me you're going to risk the whole deal here because you don't want the floor mats for your car? Yes, take the floor mats out of the contract. This has happened to me several times. If you've gone into the finance department at the car dealer and they type up this contract on the dot matrix printer and it's this big long sheet of paper and you look at it and you go, what's this little fee here? Oh, that we threw in this service contract, which is it's only $12 a month out of your payment. I go, take it out. Oh, but lots of people like it and it protects the transmission and this. I said, take it out. But I have to reprint the whole piece of paper again. That's fine. I'll wait. Right. That's an example of the 80-20 thing, which is 20% of the, or 80% of the concessionary behaviors takes place at the last 20% of the negotiation. If you have sense about these things, you have to say no. You have to have veto power. Now, if it's not that big of a deal, it's not that big of a deal. But sometimes we get tricked into, squeezed into, negotiated into things that we didn't want to pay for because it came at the end of the conversation. Have the veto power to say, I'm going to disagree with that. It needs to come out. Now, if you want to make me another offer, another trade-off about what we can put in place of that, I'm willing to listen, but that has to come out. We talked about the power of transparency. Transparency is when you have so much confidence in your homework and what you know about your side and what you think or can guess or have made an educated guess about the other side, that you can say, I can be open about what we want. We need this type of dollar figure range. We need this type of delivery of services. We need this by this span of time. We'll talk about some of the value factors like rights. We need to have all the rights for this particular project. You can have the rights for this other project, whatever it happens to be. Look at the concept of incremental disclosure. This is again connected to the power of transparency. They're linked. When you say to the other side, here's what I can tell you right now, I will reveal information to you as we go forward, as I think that moves the process forward. I'm not going to hold all my cards close to the chest and not reveal anything. As I think it makes things happen, as I think it moves the process forward, I will reveal certain pieces of information to you incrementally as we go forward. And I'm hoping that if I do that, you on the other side will do the same thing. We talk a lot in the added value approach about interest versus options. Interest is what I want, kind of the macro, and options are ways of fulfilling that. Okay, so let's say my interest is to lose weight. Okay, that's an interest. That's a macro issue, right? What are my options? Eat less, tried that, didn't work. Exercise, right? Get my stomach stapled. There's lots of options to fulfill that interest. So interest is the macro issue that you want. Options are the micro ways of fulfilling those interests, right? My interest is in getting rich, right? So my options would be to marry money, to invent something that people want to buy on the internet, to rob a bank. There's lots of options as to fulfill that interest of getting rich, right? So there's lots of opportunities to get rich if that's my primary interest. So interest, big picture, options, ways of fulfilling that. Look at some of our acronyms here we already talked about. One is the other side, TOS. The other one, WIIFM. That is 2 radio stations that the other side is listening to. What's in it for me, and make me feel important about myself. So what's in it for me says we need to solve this perspective for the other side that says, here's how this is going to be a good deal for you. I have your best interest in mind, even though I'm on the other side. I have this idea of the deal packages in mind so I can solve your problems, make me feel important about myself. Means we use praise, we use supportive language. We don't use this combative opponent, that type of stuff type language. We've been talking about value factors. There are 12 sort of basic core value factors. There's lots of them, but these are the 12 we'll talk about in just a little bit. The meet and confer cycle, the back and forth, is a process. We talk face to face, we talk over the phone, we talk via internet, we talk back and forth in lots of different ways. The meet and confer cycle is a process. We go back and forth to talk with each other, to clarify things, to fine tune the discussion. It's always better, in my perspective, if you're negotiating something that's complex and important, to do it face to face, as opposed to over the phone. Here's why. If I want to get you to say yes to something, I will get you on the phone. If I'm worried that you might talk your way out of it, I want to get you on the phone. Because think about this. You go to someone's office or they come to your office. Let's say it's a vendor or somebody you're negotiating with for some issue. The shortest amount of time that you would spend with this person in a face-to-face meeting is probably a half hour. I mean, it's pretty unusual to have 10-minute meetings, right? Unless it's an employee issue or something like that. But for the most part, we're going to spend 30 minutes with somebody talking about the issue. So if I really want to get you to say yes to it, I'm going to get you on the phone. Nobody wants to talk on the phone for 30 minutes, right? We tend to have shorter phone conversations. So the meet and confer cycle face-to-face has a different time orientation than the one it is over the phone. So if I want to get you to say yes to things, I'm going to get you on the phone. So one of the ways that you can slow down the negotiating process is let's talk face-to-face. Come in my office. Consensus decisions. We both agree in our team, or we all agree in our team, that we can go forward for this. This is an important issue because sometimes we negotiate as a group with another group. And we can agree in principle as the group leaders, and then someone in the group says, well, I disagree. I think we ought to get $40 more or $50 more or $10,000 more. And it screws up the whole process. We have to have consensus in the group, which means we don't all have to love it, but we can support it. And what you need to say as a group leader is, I will speak to the other side on our behalf. Don't blow it by saying something off the cuff or making some sort of comment which injects doubt into the proceedings. I was doing a negotiation once for this product that they were trying to sell to another side. And this guy who was an engineer said, I hope it doesn't break when we install it on your property. And the other side said, what? You hope it doesn't break? And he was just kidding. It screwed up the whole thing. It injected doubt into the process. They said, we want this warranty thing and we want this service agreement, blah, blah, blah. It was a mess. So consensus to me means we don't all have to love it, but we can agree to it and we can support it. We'll talk about the settlement range. It is a high end and a low end, and it has kind of different pieces in it, which says, here's where I can say, absolutely yes, this would be great. This is what I will take. This is what I will settle for. And then the last one where I have to say no. I'm always concerned that if you can't say no, you're not in a negotiation. Now, BATNA, this comes from Fisher and Urey's book, the Getting to Yes. They call it the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So BATNA is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And what BATNA says is sometimes we have to have a plan B. We can't negotiate with these people. It's a failure. It just won't go forward. What's our next plan? Our next plan is to wait 6 months. Our next plan is to go call another vendor. Our next plan is to do it ourselves in-house. You have to think about what your BATNA is if you can't get what you want. You go to the car dealer and you say, I want a green Subaru Outback, and I want a 2020 green Subaru Outback with this trim package. And they say, we don't have one. You say, okay, well, I'll settle for the blue one that doesn't have what I want. That's not a BATNA. The best alternative negotiated agreement says, I go online, I go to another state, I call another dealer, they ship it over to me, et cetera. That's what a BATNA is, the best alternative to the negotiated agreement or plan B. We'll talk about this concept of the deal package. Again, all the value factors grouped into a 1, 2, or 3, or A, B, or C, typically 3, typically 2 or 3, 4 is a lot, deal package. The last two go back to this concept of the abundance mentality, which says we want to think about growing the pie, expanding the pie, this idea of not reducing things that we're talking about, but adding things on to make it better for your side and for the other side as well. So why don't we negotiate? What challenges do we have? A lot of people have the need to be nice in negotiations. I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. I don't want to say no. I don't want to be rude. We get that from our parents. The need to be accepted and approved. I want good feelings at the end. That's useful, right? But sometimes we do it at our detriment. Some of us don't like conflict. We'll give in, especially for hard sales and things like that, because we don't want to tell this person, no, we don't like conflict. We have guilt about asserting our self-interest. You say, this is what I really need, but I don't want to tell the other person about it. It feels selfish to talk about what I want. You need to get over that. Fear of being taken, in quotes, and that's based on having been taken, right? You have, if you look at the right-hand side, negotiator's remorse, right? Which is, I shouldn't have bought this. We shouldn't have agreed to this deal. We shouldn't have signed this contract. I've done this with leases that I've been involved in. I'm thinking, you know, I can't figure out where my business is going to be. This lease term is too long. I can't agree to 5 years. Let's agree to 2. Being intimidated by the other side, being intimidated by their approach, not having confidence in your own abilities or your own approach or your own knowledge. Hard to think under pressure sometimes. Fear of losing face, especially with your team members and maybe with the other side. And then also sometimes we just don't have a knowledge of a negotiating process. Where did you think that you were taught all this stuff? Did you get it as a kid in the schoolyard? You did. You got it in negotiating with your parents for stuff that you wanted, with your friends, in love relationships, with teachers. But we're really sort of picking up our negotiation skills on kind of an on-the-job, on-the-fly in our personal life sort of an approach rather than a structured process. So if you're here with me today having this conversation, this may be your first exposure to negotiated training, and that's why we're talking about it. So I always say, if you cannot dictate the terms and conditions of the price, are you in a negotiation? No, you're in extortion. If you have to agree to the price, if you have to agree to the conditions or the terms, you can't say no, you're not in a negotiation, you're in extortion. If we think about this process here, if you can't say no, it's pretty hard spot to be in. We had to take this deal. We had to sell the house at this price. We had to buy the car at this price. We had to sell the car at this price. I always say the time deadlines sometimes that we put upon ourselves are artificial, and the world will not end if you wait another week. Sometimes things are absolutely carved in stone that you have to do. Other times we have some leeway, but sometimes the other side will put this take it or leave it sort of an approach onto things. And what we find out is A, they weren't serious, or B, they come back and make another offer. So look at sometimes and say, do I feel like I'm being extorted in this discussion here? Or do I feel like we're actually having a conversation which leads to a negotiated agreement? Okay, before we take a break, this is the added value negotiating method. First, we will figure out what interest you want, right? Then the second is make a guess as to what the interest is for the other side. Number 2, we identify our options. As we talked about, this is ways of fulfilling our interest. And we use the 12 or more different value factors. With our options in place to support our interests, we create at least 2 deal packages, maybe more, but at least 2. We show them to the other side to try to get an agreement. Maybe they agree them with a little bit of fine tuning, no cherry picking. Then we move to the next step, which is perfect the deal. Okay, perfecting the deal is getting it down on paper, signing it off, and making sure that the language is what we want in a plain English sort of an approach where we understand what we're getting and they understand what they're getting. Our approach and our perspective is the search for value. There's lots of trade-offs, lots of options as to what to do. We have a tendency of a positive vocabulary. We don't call people opponents, or we don't use tactics. We don't call them the enemy, and we try to add to the pie. That's the added value approach. When we come back, we will talk about some sample deal packages to give you an example of what this looks like. So I will see you all back in 15 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a great break, and thanks for your time and attention today. So let's focus on the added value negotiating method, but let's really get back to this idea of interest versus options and look at the concept of the value factors. So first off, let's talk about deal packages. You have an offer from satellite TV place, or you have an offer from Dish or DirecTV, or from Xfinity or Cox or whoever you have for your TV service. In plan A, they give you $100 a month for your TV services, free installation. You get HBO and Cinemax for a year. You get 125 channels. The service plan is $100 a year in case you need to come out and do repairs. And the modem costs you $50 when they install it. In plan B, you pay $145. You get free installation, HBO and Cinemax for 6 months, 175 channels, free service plan, and a free modem. So for an extra $45 a month, you get some of the things there for free. But let's say in plan B, in plan A, you have a 1-year contract, and in plan B, you have a 2-year contract. So you can see that there are lots of trade-offs here. Now, if this was an added value negotiating approach here with the deal packages, you would come in and say, well, I want to pay nothing for the modem, nothing for the service plan. I want 175 channels. I want HBO Cinemax for a year. I want free installation. I want to pay the plan A price. That's called cherry picking. We don't allow it. Now, you might be able to come back and negotiate certain things with your cable company, the satellite company, by saying, okay, let's come up with a plan C, which has maybe a split the difference on some of these things which we could agree upon. So you can see the deal package process works all the time in sales and marketing. We see the bronze package, the silver package, the gold package for various things. We see, plan A, plan B, plan C for healthcare coverage, things like that. So lots of ways that you can say, how do we add all these value factors into a deal package? What we don't allow in our approach, the added value approach, is cherry picking, where we get the best, the other side gets the best of all possible worlds for theirs and not for us. We just simply say no to that. But if they're not happy with this one, then they say, okay, well, what's your plan C or plan D? What can you come up with that we can look at and decide whether we want that as well? So the concept of the negotiated deal package, the set of negotiations on a concept of deal packages is not unusual. We're just asking you to think about doing it as part of your work so that you get out of this price only, single issue, single item negotiation. We look at all the value factors here. And so if we were to sit down just with a TV plan, think of all the things that you could ask for. You say, I want extra remote batteries, or I want, this obscure channel here, which usually charge $25 for, I want it for $5. That type of stuff you might be able to negotiate inside. So we look at the deal package process. It's all about choice, So look at the things the cable company the satellite company can provide for you: installation equipment, service plan, channels, premium channels, multiple modems in other rooms, length of contract, free movies. They could give you a year's worth of, free movie, Netflix access or something like that. These are all things that can be negotiated. So you may not be able to negotiate the price of the actual plan that they're trying to get for you, the $145 a month or $125. But you could negotiate some of these other things that are extras that they have some leeway as to whether or not they add or subtract these to your contract. So if we look at the concept of the value factors, there's probably more than 12, but these are the ones that we could think of. The price, how much something costs, what we're paying for, or what we're willing to sell it for. The terms, that could be, it's due in 30 days, it's due in one year. We split the down payment between us. You carry the paper, we carry the paper for you. We offer you credit, you offer us credit. That's what terms is all about. It's how the price is fulfilled. The delivery of the service, delivery of the product. The delivery of the service says, we do it over the phone, we do it over the webinar, we do it over Zoom. The delivery of the product, we deliver it to your library, we deliver it to your loading dock. We deliver the product to you online so that you download it as a downloaded, a PDF file or a book or whatever happens to be to you. Quality can oftentimes be negotiated as a value factor. If you're willing to pay, X dollars for a Mercedes, it's different than paying X dollars for a Kia. If you're willing to pay more dollars for this type of a house, then you get this type of a build quality versus another type of a build quality. If you buy a furniture, a couch that costs $2,000 versus a couch that costs $400, again, quality is the issue that can be negotiated. Service is something that be negotiated. We will come to you and service the product. You will come to us and service the product. We will provide services to you for 1 year online. We will provide services to you for 6 months, or you will provide services to us for 6 months or 1 year online. We will come to you and train you how to use the product. You will come to us and train us how to use the product. You'll provide training to our employees for 6 months or 1 year for free or for a cost. Resources is sort of a catch-all. It's things that we think about that may not fall under one of these other 12 value factors here. So then we look at the ones in our added value negotiating book that we talked about for our value factors. We talked about money, property, actions, rights, and risks. Now, money could be Bitcoins. It could be gold coins. It could be silver pirate doubloons. It could be Chinese yuan. It could be pesos. It could be lots of things. In the global economy, money can be lots of things, right? So there could be paper money. It could be electronic money, right? Property could be intellectual property. We will share the intellectual property on this particular product with you, or the rights to it revert back to us after 1 year, something like that. So it could be physical property, something we buy, like a piece of furniture. It could be intellectual property. Actions are things that we will do or won't do, or things that you will do or won't do. And then we talk about time span. You will do this within 30 days. We will do this for you within 30 days, or we won't do this. We won't go outside and seek another competitive bid for 60 days, something like that. Rights and risks are oftentimes connected too. Rights are the things that we give to you or you give to us. We hold the rights to this product. We hold the rights to this service. We hold the rights to this agreement for a span of time, or we give up these rights to you. And then risks. We will buy an insurance policy for this particular project. We will hold and we will indemnify you of the risks, or you will indemnify us of the risks going forward. So when we look at the 12 different possible value factors, there's lots of ways to create these into ways to fulfill our interest. We can use these as options to fulfill our interest in what we want in our deal packages. So let's go back to this idea of the power of transparency. And sometimes people get stuck on the feeling here that we're giving up too much. Again, we go back to the idea of incremental disclosure. If I tell you things on an incremental step-by-step as necessary as it moves the process forward, then I feel a little bit more comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, if you're not within your comfort zone, then don't reveal the information. But if you feel it moves the process forward, and it also, look at the bottom one, it sort of models the kind of behavior that you want from the other side, then be more willing to say, here's what we need, here's what we want. I'm big on the idea of telling people right up front, this is what I need for this deal, so that there's no guesswork, and they can go, well, that either works for us or it doesn't, or they can put their thought process in terms of how they meet my needs versus my meeting their needs. Again, we think in terms of trade-offs. I don't use the word concessions. We use the word trade-offs or options to say which ways can we fulfill what we're trying to do without giving up. And that's where the conceding part I go against. Enhance your confidence by doing your homework. We've done research, Google research on this organization. We know what they're all about. We've had meetings with this organization. We know what they're all about. We've talked to the people involved in this product or service. We have a feel for what they're all about. Trust your instincts when it comes to the power of transparency. If you think it moves the process forward, tell the other folks what you need or some information. My thing is I want to get away from this conversation that people tend to have at the end. They go, if you had told us that, it would have went faster. If you had told us that and we knew what you needed, it would have gone better, more smoother. I hate when we have those kinds of conversations. That's why I like the idea of the power of transparency. So let's talk about some of these processes here. We look at some additional value factors besides just the price: house, car, timeshare, building lease, raise, funeral, that type of thing. Let's talk about some of these examples here. Okay, so you're buying a house. You could ask for a long or a short escrow. I've seen escrows as long as 6 months. I've seen escrows when we were in our California house, it was 12 days. We had a 12-day escrow. Free use of our swimming pool for 2 months. You buy my house, you get to use my pool for 2 months in June and July. We'll pay for the pool service for our house after we leave for 1 year. I can park my trailer, RV, or boat on the property for 6 months after we buy the house. We'll just leave it in the back and you won't even notice it. We'll pay for the gardener service. So you pay for the gardener service for 1 year. You'll install or remove a satellite dish. We'll buy an insurance policy for the appliance warranties. We'll install a perimeter fence, so you'll install a perimeter fence. You'll haul or cut down or trees or grind stumps. You'll pay the HOA fees, and we'll pay the HOA fees for our homeowners association for 1 year. Look at all the things besides just the price of the house. And there are literally hundreds that we could think of or come up with. And all the other side can say is no to some of these. But sometimes you can say, if you want this price, then I want these additional value factors here. If you want us to pay this price, we would like these other things here. And we add this to the list of things that we ask for. And we see this all the time in real estate deals. It's not common, but it is ways to expand the pie. Okay, we're buying a car at the dealership. I'd like a free full tank of gas when we buy it. I'd like lifetime oil changes. I've got that. Free alignment every 30,000 miles. I should say every there. Car washes for 1 year. You will negotiate a lease to own purchase price for us now rather than when the car has had some wear and tear on it. Let's figure out a purchase price. So we're leasing it now for $400 a month. When we purchase the car, let's say when it gets to 36,000 miles, we've already agreed on the purchase price. Free software update for my navigation system, upgraded floor mats, things like that. So look at all the things that you maybe add to the car product, to the trim packages, to the things that are inside the car, some extra things that you can have installed on the car or services that they provide, not just the price that you pay, but you're getting other value factors as well. So I just did this. We moved to a new office building here in Springfield. We had lots of negotiations about things that they will do for us and versus what we'll do besides just pay the rent. Split the utilities, upgraded internet service, free furniture moving and move-in, free exterior signage, deep clean before move-in, paint, carpet, installations, discounts on those, access to the conference room, access to the reception services for 1 year. Lots of things that you can negotiate besides just the price that you pay for the building lease. And again, you can negotiate the price as the square footage, you can negotiate the price as the square footage, but all these other things come in, and not just looking at the price of the move-in, the square footage as the only value factor. It's just one of them. We can add these other things in as well. So you go to your boss and you say, I'd like a raise. And your boss says, there's no money in the budget for that. And you say, okay, well, see you next year. Well, okay, let's talk about what we might be able to add as different value factors besides just a change in compensation. Say, okay, can we revisit this in 6 months? Can I get a promotion or a change in title now and more money in next year or more money in 6 months? Can I get a city or county car to drive home? Can I get a gas card if I travel between branches? Can I get a gym membership to work out my stress? Can I get an assistant, part-time at first, but then full-time later? Will you put an assistant into my budget? Will you pay for my association memberships and dues to ALA-related memberships and things like that? Will you pay for my parking in the building? Will you pay for my daycare costs? Do I get tuition reimbursement if I go back to library school? Will you pay my conference dues if we go to training programs? Will you pay my training fees for programs like this, for example? Will you upgrade my smartphone, printer, laptop, tablet, or PC? If you can't give me a raise, will you give me better equipment? Can I get a bigger office? Can I get better furniture inside my office? All things, if you say, okay, asking for a raise may or may not be on the table with the current budget situation, but can we foreshadow that we may have to have the raise, or can we have the raise conversation 6 months from now, but can I get some of these things in lieu of getting a raise? Again, all potential value factors, and you would put these into deal packages. In this raise deal, I'd like, this change in compensation, $5,000 a year difference. And this one I'll take $3,500, and this one I'll take $10,000, but these are some of the things I would want to go into the deal package that support either a higher change in compensation, or if I can't get one, at least additional benefits. I left the weddings and the funeral ones kind of out. The funeral one sort of depressed me in the COVID era here. But in the weddings, think about all the things that you can negotiate. You have the flower people, the food people, the cake people, the videographer, the photograph people. You have the facility, the pastors, all that stuff. Those are all negotiated value factors. You can say more of this, less of that. Can you do this for me? I'll let you put your wedding photograph information, your website on my wedding invitations if you cut the price of doing the photography for us, that type of thing. Funerals, pretty tough to negotiate with the people during that. It's a painful situation, but think of all the value factors there. Cremation, casket style, embalming services, all the things that are part of that process can be discussed or negotiated. So let's talk about homework. And for me, this idea of doing homework says that we have sat down as a team or individually and said, let us figure out what we need to know. If anything, we can figure out about the other side. I got a solicitation by an attorney to provide some expert witness help just last week. So I went online, and the attorney did not have a website. They just had an email address. Then I looked up their information on the Bar Association for that particular state, and they had a bunch of sanctions and punishments from the Bar Association. I did not do business with that person. Now, they had an urgent issue, and I said, I'm sorry, I just can't do it for you. So I did my homework, not having a website, being a sole proprietor with a lot of sanctions by the Bar Association is a number of red flags. You can look on your Google searches, networking with other people, gathering good economic intelligence about this organization, safely, legally, ethically. Get in-house advice from colleagues or coworkers or people in the library service that you know off the internet. What do you hear in the grapevine? Can you visit this location and see what they're all about? I mean, if you come to my office, you'll see a great building and a nice place to be. I mean, you know, you go by somebody else's office and they're working in a garage behind the house. It's kind of a different perspective. Internal negotiations are difficult as well. We can use the added value approach for that. But what we have with internal negotiations is they know your limits. And when you say it's not in the budget, they go, yes, it is. They know your financial limitations and what you may be able to pay for or not. So get help from your colleagues that can find out about other departments, other team members. Remember to keep the emotional temperature down. If necessary, bring in somebody, an outside person like a mediator. I've done this many times between teams to sort of lower the emotional temperature and keep people focused on the end result, which is a good deal and a shared fate. But I've had people in when I do my training program on this say, you're not entitled to that information, even though we work for the same company, which is ridiculous. And I say, why wouldn't you say to this person, here's what our budget is? Because they could look it up and know anyway, right? But why would you say that? Because sometimes people in internal negotiations will act like they're in an external negotiation. They will treat a colleague as if they were, quote, the other side. Not useful. So we talked about the settlement range. This is something that came out of my AMA work and also what we saw in Fisher and Urey's Getting to Yes, especially this idea of the BATNA. The BATNA is Plan B, the best alternative to negotiated agreement. What is Plan B? So at the top, which is what I really want, then we have the next step, which is what I'll accept. Least acceptable agreement is what I'll settle for. I'm not thrilled about it, but I'll still take it. And then below that's a deal breaker. So if your maximum supportable position for your house is $350,000 and your deal breaker is $300,000, that's your settlement range. Now, if you come in for the other side, their deal breaker may be $350,000 and their maximum supportable position may be $300,000. You don't necessarily have to have dollar figures here, but sometimes these deal breaker versus maximum supportable position and these other ones could be based on behaviors. If they don't do this, it's a deal breaker for us. If they do this, it is a deal breaker for us. And now our best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or Plan B, says this is what we will do in an alternative if we can't make a deal. And I always say you better know what you're going to say yes and no to coming in, and at what point do you have to say this is a deal breaker and we're either going to wait or we're going to go to another vendor or another person that can provide the same services. So let's go through the steps of the add value negotiating process. Know what you want going in. So have this conversation with yourself or other people and say, what is our settlement range? What is our deal breaker? What do we want to pay? What are we trying to get as products or services? Look at the long and short-term needs and goals. Is this a relationship that's going to last for 6 months or a year, or it's a one-time you never speak to these people again? Put yourself in the other side's position. Say, what do we think they want? What do you think they want? Calculate the real and hidden costs of any deal. If we're engaged in this relationship and we have a 2-year contract, how much could this cost if we have to break the contract? If we have a 1-year contract, how much could it cost us? If we don't get a 2-year one, it could be cheaper to have a 2-year deal, et cetera. And then don't confuse interest with options. Interest is the macro big picture. Options are ways of fulfilling that. Interest is get rich. Options are ways to do that. Interest is to lose weight. Options are ways to lose weight. Step 2, brainstorm the potential value factors and all the various combinations: money, property, actions, rights, risks, service, installation, delivery, training, resources, all the things we talked about. Create a list of acceptable options. Fire alarm, great. Create a list of I think they're testing the fire alarm in the building. Create a list of acceptable options for the other side and factor in any new information you get in conversations with them. Analyze the cost to you and the other side in terms of what trade-offs you're going to make, not concessions. Have somebody else look over your work and say, what are we missing in terms of potential value factors that we could add to this to make the pie larger? Again, the biggest part of this added value negotiating approach for me is the deal package. At least 2 deal packages. 3 would be better. 2 is a perfect set if you got 2. 3 would be good. 4 and 5s tend to get a little unwieldy, but 2, 3 right around that range tends to be good. Try not to focus on just single issue like price or wages or the cost of something. Look at how we look at all the value factors, and we don't get into sequence negotiations, which is let's negotiate price, then move on to the next issue. The minute we do that, then price becomes a factor anytime we talk about something new. look at the totality of the deal. The deal package has price in it. Second deal package has price in it. Third deal package has price in it, but has all the other value factors as well. Allow the other side to create some deals or agree on a third party to do so. I've done that just to come in and say, okay, I'll create for you deal packages, which based on my knowledge of both sides. If they're not happy with yours, then say, okay, what's missing? Tell us what we need to see and come back with our deal number 3 or 4. Try to balance the deals so they're not so overwhelmingly, obvious in one way, like we want them to choose number 1, so we'll make 2 and 3 really horrible. And don't allow cherry picking. And never put a deal package together, 2, 3 deals together that you wouldn't accept. And then you have your fingers crossed and you say, I hope they don't take number 2. That's the one that's the worst for us. And they choose number 2 every time, right? We know this in life, right? Whenever you say, I hope this doesn't happen, that happens, right? So when we look at the deal packages, say, 1 and 2 and 3, I like 3 the best, but if they took 1 and 2, I'd be happy. So never create a deal package that says, I'm not happy with any of them. I hope they don't pick any of them, or don't front load one, hoping that they're going to take that as the exclusion of the other. Don't allow them to cherry pick and make perfect deal package number 4. It's not good for you. Again, we talked about the value of veto power. So I'm into the semantic possibilities here in terms of how we think about the deal package, AKAs, also known as. You could call them approaches, proposals, offers, solutions, deals, presentations, options, possibilities, opportunities. Sometimes we call them deals or deal packages. I like that phrase. I think it has a good semantic connection in terms of negotiation, but maybe there are other ways that you can sort of do this. I did my library safety and security program yesterday for a library. And I always say to people, I never use the P word when talking to patrons. I never say policy. Sir, our policy says, I always say one of our approaches, how we typically handle this, or one of our usual rules is, one of the guidelines we ask our patrons to follow. I try not to use the P word policy because it's kind of a law book sort of a phrase. So when we look at deal package, also known as, what can we say if we don't want to use the phrase deal packages? Some of these other ones may be palatable for you and for the other side. So we're kind of at a crossroads in step number 4. If the other side does not like one of the deals or any of the deal packages that you've created, then take a break, do some more homework, ask better questions, ask them to create deals. And if you're comfortable with the 2 or 3 that you've created, then stand firm. Sometimes I talk to people, and we'll get this at the end of the program, we'll talk about sort of tricks and tactics that have come up in negotiation. Sometimes I say to people, if the other side is really difficult to deal with, if the other side is really uses a lot of tricks and tactics and gets into this sort of win-lose and pounding on the table. I had these guys from a union back east say, we eat garlic bagels, and onion bagels before we go in there, and we don't brush our teeth, so we have bad breath, and we make the room really hot, so they're uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that, right? I'm not going to sit in that kind of environment. In which case I stand firm. I go, you know what? These are what they are. You pick from the 1, 2, or 3 that you like. We're not going to make any changes here. But if the other side is amenable, if the other side is practical, if the other side is communicating with you, if the other side is cordial, then you can say, we can be more collaborative, more collegial in this discussion, and we can make some changes and do some horse trading inside the deal packages. Not cherry pick, but maybe create a deal package that we both can agree upon, and using the concept to say, well, what do you really need out of any of these 3? And they said, well, we like this common factor in all 3. That needs to be in deal number 4. Okay, let's start to do that. And then we can create a deal package number 4 that we both can agree upon. I've had long conversations with people that are into the win-lose negotiation method. When I was living in California, sometimes the union people would say, we're setting the meeting for 8 a.m. or 7:30 a.m., which would be, 8 a.m. would be 5 o'clock in the morning, California time. And I'd be jet lagged and tired, and I would get there and the room would be hot or cold or whatever, and they wouldn't give me any coffee. And the idea was they want me to be on a bad foot. The idea is they want me to be uncomfortable. And you know as well as me, when you are uncomfortable in most situations in life, you have a tendency to say no rather than yes. If you're happy, if you feel peaceful, if you feel safe, you're much more likely to say yes to things. So if it was me, I would say, okay, we're going to set the meeting at 10. That gives you some time to sleep and get some breakfast and get in here. And we want you comfortable to be able to say yes to the things we're talking about. So I always think about this in terms of sort of the behavior part, which is don't fall into the usual traps of, I have to be a quote, tough negotiator. And what I always say, and my dad always says, and what we said in the added value book is, tough negotiators oftentimes don't get very much because they don't give up very much. They come away with smaller deals than they could have gotten if they were more collaborative, more collegial. So if we can move to a deal package that both sides can agree upon, then we get into closing the deal, right? So make sure your data is correct. Make sure that you're clear on paper as to what you're going to agree upon. And then make sure that you're appealing to the emotions in somebody's decisions. You say, this is a good solution to the issues that you're trying to solve. It's a good solution for us. We like it. We hope you like it. Let's put in some protection phrases into our deal packages. If you do this, then we will do this. If you don't do this, then we will do this, right? So we have some if-then language in there. We have some escape clauses. After 30 days, after 60 days, all rights revert back to us, right? We have some escape clauses that say, you have 48 hours to agree to this deal, and if that, it expires. Or we have 48 hours to agree to this deal, in which case it expires. Based on inspection of your product, services, location, and whatever, contingent upon X, Y, and Z. Following our review of your financials, your database, whatever it happens to be. A review of the product, inspection of the product, whatever it happens to be. Protection phrases. So look at that first bullet point in the perfection of the deal. One of the things that Al Gore tried to do when he was working in the Clinton administration was come up with something called plain English. And there's actually a plainenglish.gov, which is a website that's connected somehow to the federal government, which says we should be encouraging people to write contracts, letters of agreement, proposals, contracts and things where we're making a negotiated agreement on something in plain English. So I talk about P's and Pecs. P's and Pecs is not vegetables and chest muscles. It's plain English agreements, plain English contracts. We know from our experience when we look at a car lease, car purchase, house purchase, some complicated thing that we buy, there's lots of language in there. Party of the first part hereafter known as, party of the second part hereafter known as. Lots of language about force majeure and things that lawyers like to put in there. I like lawyers. They serve a purpose, but oftentimes their language for things is not plain English. I remember a piece I read in some business magazine that talked about, I think it was one of the aerospace manufacturers. And they said, our function is going to go through with our attorneys and turn our contracts that are usually 300 pages long into something that an average person who's not an attorney can read and understand. And they actually went through, I think it was Northrop Grumman or one of those types of places. They went through and they just turned the language in their contracts into plain English. We will do this on this date and time. You will do this on this date and time for this cost, et cetera. And it became such a process in the organization where we said, let's look at how we make this language so that the average person who's not an aerospace engineering lawyer could read this and figure out what we're going to do on behalf of the government or on behalf of these vendors that we're working with. The second step there that we're concerned about is something called the afterbite. The afterbite is a trick and tactic. And what it is when you've come to an agreement, the other person says, well, how about this? Well, how about this? So let's say you come to an agreement, you've shaken hands digitally or bumped elbows or bumped fists or whatever you do in the day of the pandemic here. And the person says, well, how about an extra $10,000 or units or whatever? And you go, what? And then we get down to that 80-20 issue is 80% of the concessions happen in the last 20% of the negotiated behavior. This is where you have to say, no, I can't do that. Now you want to go back and renegotiate, let's do that, but I'm not going to agree to something. If you look at men's clothing, when I used to go in and buy suits, the guy would say, okay, here's a nice suit, and we'd get it all tailored up and it'd be pretty expensive. And then the guy would say, how about some shoes or a shirt? And you go, how much are they? Go, no, it's extra $150. And I think, all right, that's an afterbite, right? They throw on something and they bite into you after the deal's already been settled. What I would say to the suit guy is, okay, well, can we take a price off the suit, or what kind of deal do you have on shirts or ties that's different than me just paying an extra $150 for? The deal package can be reviewed by you. If it has to be attorneys or other people that can look at it and make sure that you've got the kind of language that you want in there and that you've got a good collection of fairness on your part and fairness on their part. What is the shared fate that we have if we're going to be connected with these people on the other side in some sort of long-term deal? Do we have good post-negotiation feelings? I like the idea of ritual rewards and celebrations, which is, whether it's a digital handshake or we thank each other for the process. Sometimes we have, closure lunches and closure dinners. I did some work for this loan company that would do deals with companies that had a lot of really bad credit, and they would come in to do these loans with them, and they'd have a closure dinner, and they would give them this plastic glass sort of trophy sort of thing with their name inscribed in the partnership. And those things cost like $150, and they added that to the cost of their loan. So they charged them for the little plaque that they gave them, which I thought was ridiculous. So when we look at the perfecting of the deal, we want to make sure that from a legal standpoint, from a behavioral action, operational standpoint, that we covered all the deals, all the parts of the deal that we need to. So let's think a little bit about how people perceive the world. I use this model a lot. I use my dad's Mindex model as a self-assessment instrument. I also use this one as well called I Speak Your Language. It was published by Drake B. Morin. It's based on the writings of the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung. And Jung talks about 4 different sort of personality styles that people typically have. And you may see these on the other side. One is the feeler style, which is very people-oriented. They have a human connection, a need to make a human connection. So they're really people-oriented. If they know you, like you, and trust you at a personal level, they're much more likely to do business with you. The sensor style is action-oriented. They want to get the business done and move on. The sensor style is fast-talking, quick decision-making. They tend to be, don't need a lot of data. If they like you, that's fine, but it's not necessary. So for the feeler, the feelings part is very important. But for the sensor, the action orientation, so let's get this done. The thinker, which is my dad's style, is scientific, engineering, technical, CPA, accounting, computers, where they need facts and figures. And for the thinker style in negotiation, you better give them data which adds up. You better give them data where 2 + 2 = 4. Otherwise, they will think the presentation, the deal packages process is flawed. So for the thinker, they need facts. They are less concerned about the feelings and the action orientation. They need time to think about whether the facts make sense. The intuitor style is about the future focus. The intuitor style is they tend to be much more sort of brainstorming. So they're good problem solvers. The intuitors can help you come up with a lot of deal package complexities, but also they have kind of a future focus. What are we going to do downstream? Whereas the sensor is action oriented today. The feeler does not have the same time orientation as the intuitor does. And the thinker has a time orientation based on how long this person needs to interpret the data. So we all have our feet in each of these 4 categories, but we have a tendency towards some. I'm a sensor by activity. I eat fast, I type fast, I drive fast, I talk fast. I make pretty quick decisions. I don't need a lot of data to make decisions. I have, I think, good people skills, but only situationally. So I'm an introvert trapped in an extrovert's profession. A lot of times I'm introverted, but I can be a good people orientation when I need to be. Again, my dad is the one that really has that thinker, scientific, fact-oriented kind of an approach. Intuitor style, again, is a future focus and kind of a good brainstormer. So if you think when you're looking at the other style, where does this person need, fall into these 4 categories? Again, these are hybrids. But if you say this person is, a feeler, then they want to do lunch. They want to talk about their family and their kids and what's going on in their life and the world around them. Whereas for the sensor, that's a waste of time. Whereas the thinker may not be necessary as well. It's useful, I think, to look at these styles and say, where does this person on the other side come into? So I can be more like them during this conversation. I'm not sacrificing my personality. I'm just altering my approach to be more comfortable for them. Thinkers need facts, give them facts. Sensor wants to make a decision, make it easier for that person to do so. Feelers need to make a human connection before they decide, make it easier for them to do that. Intuitors allow them to brainstorm. When you think about the negotiation process, this is a phrase my dad has used for many years, which is your strength taken to an extreme becomes a weakness. Your strength taken to an extreme becomes a weakness. So sometimes you can get too focused on one area and it takes you out of another area. So you could be too focused on the facts and figures. You could be too focused on the feelings part. Your strength taken to an extreme becomes a weakness. So what we're looking for here is balance. That's why sometimes it's good to have other people take your perspective and review it before you go forward with the deal. I like the Verbal Judo book that was written by George Thompson. He talks about a model in the Verbal Judo book called LEAPS, active listening, paying attention to people, not just waiting for them to stop, but listening to them before you take notes, empathizing their perspective and yours, asking good open-ended questions designed to extract information, not a lot of yes/no questions till we get to the end, but more open-ended questions to get them to tell your point of view. Paraphrasing proves that you are listening, and then summarizing. If I understand you, you need this. What we're looking for is this. Does that make sense to you? I like that book. I always encourage people to get it. A couple things in terms of the communication process for added value negotiating. One is that we want to sometimes use the power of silence. There's always sort of an old sales talk, which is whoever talks first blows the deal. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but sometimes you can talk your other side, customer, client, vendor, whoever it is, out of the deal by talking too much. And sometimes just using the power of silence while they mull it over, while they think about it, is a powerful way for them to agree. Read the nonverbals. If they're upset, they oftentimes will leak out nonverbally how they're upset in their facial expressions, their body language. That's why the telephone is not always the useful way to negotiate, because all we get is tone. We don't get the body language. Sometimes with your team, you may want to play role play, just a little bit of what ifs. Okay, what if they say this? What if they do this? What if their answer to our deal packages is this? Then what's our response? We talked about the value of open-ended questions versus closed-ended. Open-ended questions, tell me more about the situation. What problems are you trying to solve? Instead of saying, is there a deal here that you like? We use closed-ended questions, yes, no questions at the end of the deal, open-ended ones at the beginning to get more information. I like the idea of venting and validation. Sometimes we let people vent about the current situation, about their frustrations, whatever they are, and we validate them. I hear you. Thanks for telling me about that. Sometimes we can get them to model what we want in terms of open transparency and communication by just mirroring that for them. I'm going to be open and transparent as much as I can be, with the hope, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, that you'll be the same way. So here we're kind of at a crossroads as we wind up with this idea of how people see good negotiations going well and bad negotiations not going well. And we'll talk about tricks and tactics, and then I'll turn you on to a really cool article, which you can read about. It's a humor article in the New Yorker about the negotiation process involving the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. So good post-negotiation feelings. We're happy with the deal. We got some value. We felt like we were treated with respect. We were willing to do business with these folks again because there was a mutual search for value. They weren't trying to cram something down our throat. They weren't in this take it or leave it kind of approach. There was a mutual search for value. Not so good. Dislike the other side. Unhappy with the result. Lost face. Lost respect. Were disrespected. Talked down to. Frustrated. We got exposed to a lot of tricks and tactics. We would not do business with these people again. That's a bad post-negotiation ending. Negotiators' remorse, buyer's remorse, whatever you want to call it. So tricks and tactics, we have a list of them here, which I'll go through kind of quickly. Be aware they exist. They don't always get used, but at least be aware that these possibilities can exist. And then use your veto power. Your ability to say no to something is your strongest part of a negotiation. If you can't say no, you're not in a negotiation. Get help from your colleagues or coworkers, bosses to support your position, and also to kind of fine tune what you're looking at or what you're hearing from the other side. Does it sound like a trick?
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please?
Another fire drill.
We are performing maintenance on the fire alarm system.
One of the things I like to focus on,
This is only a performance.
what I like to focus on is what I call test for truth.
Future alarm, and you will be notified.
Oh, the building lady's going to talk for a while. The test for truth for me says, well, tell me more about that. Or when you make that claim that you always or you never, or you people always, or your organization never, or your library always does this or does that. Test for truth. Give me some examples. Sometimes people say stuff in sweeping generalizations and it's just not true. Look for more opportunities to trade off things. Look for more opportunities to expand the value factors. If you feel comfortable where you are, if the deal packages you have created are what you want, and you don't get a lot of trade-offs and support from the other side, hold firm, stand your position. Call out the other side on unethical behavior. Sometimes you can point out the tricks and tactics. Good cop, bad cop, bracketing, things like that we'll talk about. You can sometimes call them out on these behaviors here. So the afterbite we talked about. After the deal is over, they add on some things, they bite into you again. Baseball bat, they threaten you with lawyers. We're going to sue you, right? Blanketing, they give you lots and lots of paper. You have to read 50, 60 pages of paper before you have each meeting. Sometimes they just blanket you with paper. Bracketing, let's not talk about the value of the deal. Let's talk about the price only, right? We'll just focus on that. LAFO is last and final offer. Take it or leave it. Sometimes you have to say, I'm going to leave it, right? The ways, they'll delay things 30 days, 60 days, and sometimes they're out looking for another deal. They're just trying to get you to have a time crunch where you agree to a price that you wouldn't do because you're in this delay. You have to solve it by the deadline. Fine print, lots of contracts, some things that you read in there, and really, 8-point type that says this is actually a 2-year deal than a 1-year deal. Again, read everything before you sign stuff. Have your attorneys, if necessary, have other people read that stuff. Good cop, bad cop. One person is cooperative, the other person's a jerk. They try to put pressure on you to go with the good person, the cooperative person who actually is the one that's going to make a worse deal for you. High ball, low ball, which is, they start off at a really inflated high dollar figure, something you're not going to pay for, or they come in for you and say, we're only going to give you this, even though you know that the value is much higher. Higher authority, I can't decide till my boss comes on to approve. Sometimes that's a tactic where they just say, I'm going to wait for you to agree to a higher price because we're not going to wait for my boss to say yes to this lower price. Intimidation is kind of related to the baseball bat. They use threatening language. Nibbling is where they keep asking you for free stuff. The salami approach is where they cut the deal into little pieces instead of saying, let's look at the total deal package, which we would prefer. Let's talk about price. Let's talk about delivery. Let's talk about service, right? Silence, sometimes you can't reach them. They've disappeared. They've ghosted you. You have to have a plan B. Surprise, they come up with some really crazy alternative deal at the end, which is not realistic or useful for you. And sometimes they have the take it or leave it perspective, in which case you have to say, based on our research, we're going to leave it. Good deals take time. You need homework. You need a little brainstorming with yourself and your colleagues. You need to have some meetings, perhaps based on the complexity of the negotiation with your colleagues, to say, what are we leaving on the table? What are we forgetting? Do we have a good list of questions that we need answered by the other side? Are we willing to provide answers to the other side about the questions they ask us? What are our interests in this deal? What are our options to fulfill those interests? And can we look at the many value factors and come up with a set of deal packages? How do we meet with the other side? Face-to-face, over the phone, over the internet? My preference, especially for complex deals and things where we want to make a good decision, we meet people face-to-face. Okay, at least over Zoom, you get some body language as well. The deal package creation process, let's be creative. Let's come up with some really good deals, which have a lot of interesting value factors where the other side thinks, wow, I never thought that was in there. I never thought that was a possibility. We have to have a good pitch to the other side of the deals. Sometimes in the negotiation process, the person who is the best sort of people person, best sales oriented person, may be a good person to pitch to the other side. Maybe it's the person who has the best technical knowledge about things, or the financial knowledge would be the best person to pitch. I may not be the best person to pitch if I have colleagues that are smarter, sharper, and better in certain details than I am. They may be the one to do it. Adjust and meet as needed to make sure you can get to closure. Make sure that you have this sense of, we don't want buyer's remorse on either side. We want a fair deal for both sides. If they're not going to be cooperative, then protect your own interests. But if they are, keep working through fine-tuning things where you get to a sense where this was a good deal for both sides. And think about this deal package process, this multiple deal opportunity we've been talking about. So last little thing, and this is kind of fun. Ian Fraser is a writer for the New Yorker. He's been writing for them for a long time. Back in 90, this is what, 30 years ago, is that possible? He wrote a really cool book called Coyote v. Acme, which was a collection of short stories, and they're all humor stories. And one of his short stories inside there was the Coyote v. Acme short story where the Wile E. Coyote character sues Acme Corporation for, I think, $62 million for all the injuries and pain and suffering that he's had over the many decades of trying to chase the Roadrunner. So the language in there is hilarious. It's written by an attorney, Ian Fraser writing like an attorney about his clients, sooty discolorations and, burnt tail and all this other stuff. It's just hilarious. So when I do a live version of this program as a half-day program, I typically will pass out as kind of the final exam a copy of that Coyote v. Acme story, and I'll have one side play the lawyers for the Coyote, and one side play the lawyers for Acme Corporation. And it's great to hear them come up with deal packages, how we make the Coyote whole in this deal, in this added value process here. And it's just fun to watch people have a good time with the discussion. So I like it. I think you can get the Ian Fraser's article online if you go to the New Yorker and look in their archives. I think they've got a free version of it. I just saw it last week when I was putting this together. So it makes me laugh when I think about this and the added value approach here, which is how do we create deal packages that fix Mr. Coyote's injuries, and how do we make deal packages that make sure Acme protects their interest as well for selling jet skates and rockets and all the other stuff that they sell, and the trampolines and cannonballs and all the stuff that he's been injured with over the years. So when I think about this concept, the added value negotiating approach, my thing for us is, how do we move away from single issue price only negotiations? How do we get the other side thinking about multiple deal opportunities? Try it, practice it on those little negotiations that you have where you think this may work if we put in this multiple deal opportunity, and start to build some momentum where you start to think about how you could use it for the larger deals that you have. So back over to Vicki. Thanks everybody. Happy holidays, and thanks for your time and attention. I want to make sure that if we have any questions on the chat, we can take a look at them, and I'll certainly do that.